Hey guys, Captain Frank, your favorite contract corporate pilot, coming to you today with a very sad story from the past. In 2019, on June 20th, 10 people died because of complacency. And we're going to talk about it, so stay tuned. Now guys, be prepared. This is very hard to watch. And it breaks my heart to think of what these people went through in the last 17 seconds of their life. Now, as you can see here, just after takeoff, the plane starts to veer to the left of the runway. Something is definitely wrong. In fact, the captain says, "What the heck?" And the co-pilot says, "You just lost your left engine." Now, the proper thing to do is to press on the right rudder to counter the asymmetric thrust. Bring the nose down a little bit and raise the dead engine side of the wing about 5 degrees. Now, in addition, you need to pitch for V2 while maintaining directional control. V2, also known as takeoff safety speed, is the minimum airspeed an aircraft must achieve by the time it reaches 35 feet above the runway to ensure a safe climb even in the event of an engine failure. Instead, the captain pressed on the left rudder, which made the VMC even worse. And what VMC is minimal controllable airspeed on a multi-engine aircraft with one engine inoperative. By the time the captain realized that he had stepped on the wrong rudder, it was too late. There was no recovering the aircraft at that altitude. Now let's talk about the pilots. The captain, 71 years old, over 16,400 hours in flight time, 1,100 hours in type, and 45 hours in the last 90 days. Now, he had just recently done his recurrent training in the airplane. The problem with doing it in the airplane is that you cannot simulate real V1 cuts. It's just too dangerous. But when you do it in the simulator, you can make it as realistic as it could possibly be. Now, the co-pilot was a 28-year-old male with 2,357 hours total time. He had accumulated about 189 hours in the last 90 days. Now, it's important to keep in mind that he was not qualified to operate the controls of the airplane. I believe he had a type rating in the BE 200, which does not require a type rating. Okay, guys, now we have to go over the timeline. But before I do that, I want to remind you that every time I talk about things in aviation, I say that you cannot rush. You must use your checklists, and you must brief, and you must communicate. Cockpit Resource Management, CRM. I'm going to show you this timeline, and I want you to see what happens. Every item on the checklist has to be done. There are 30 items on the before start checklist alone. Now, here we go. At 8:59, the passengers board the airplane. Now, getting 8 passengers on the airplane takes a couple minutes. They have to put on their seatbelts. The last person on the plane is either the captain or the co-pilot. They have to close the cabin door. That requires a series of several checks. Make your way up to the cockpit, get in, put on your seatbelt, and then go through the before start checklist. Like I said, it's 30 items long. Now, look at this timeline and tell me if you think any checklists were done. At 8:59, the passengers board. 9 o'clock was the planned takeoff time. By 9:02, the pilot is starting to get impatient. By 9:02 and 59 seconds, the first engine starts. At 9:03 and 15 seconds, the second engine starts. At 9:05 and 16 seconds, they call ground and ask for taxi instructions, and they were given taxi instructions to runway 15. The tower asked them at 9:08 if they would be ready at the end, and they responded, obviously, yes. At 9:09 and 41 seconds, they were cleared for takeoff and told to make a left turn to 050. At 9:10 and 10 seconds, the pilot began the takeoff roll. Now, looking at that timeline, do you think that there was a good amount of communication in that cockpit? Do you think that there were any briefings done? Do you think that any checklists were done? Well, if you don't, you're 100% right, because the NTSB listened to the CVR, the cockpit voice recorder, and reported that there was no communications via briefing or checklists before takeoff. Now, this is how I give my emergency takeoff briefing, which obviously they did not do here. I'll ask them to pay attention, and then I'll say, okay, this is how it's going to go. Anything between 0 and 80 knots will stop for anything whatsoever. Call abort, 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 stop, stop, stop. I'll bring the airplane to a stop. You talk to the tower, and I'll taxi us off the runway. Between 80 and V1, which is decision speed, we will stop for the following items: an engine fire, an engine failure, a loss of directional control, or an obstacle on the runway. After that, we're going to take it into the air as an in-flight emergency. At VR plus, I will rotate. Positive rate will get that gear up. I'm going to pitch for V2 until 400 feet. At 400 feet, if we have flaps in, we'll get them up. If not, I'm going to pitch for 125, which is blue line. That's the safest single engine speed on a multi-engine aircraft. I'm going to take it up to 1,500 feet. Now, the only thing we're going to do is if the engine does not feather, remember this airplane has auto feather, is you will confirm that the engine feathered. If it didn't, I will guard the good engine. You will slowly initially feather the bad engine, making sure that you have the right one, and then completely feather it. I'm going to maintain directional control of the airplane and take us up to 1,500 feet. Remember, I transitioned to 125 at 400 feet. We will do no checklist prior to 1,500 feet. After that, once we're leveled off, we'll do our checklist, and then we'll decide whether we come back to this airport or to a different airport that may have a longer, more suitable runway. Do you have any questions? The answer is usually no. Now, you see how long that took. That's a proper briefing. We make sure that everyone understands what's going on. Now, certain pilots may do theirs a little differently. This is how I do mine. Mine is a little long, but I don't care. I want them to understand what we're going to do. That alone could have saved the lives of these people, but it wasn't done because of what I said in the very beginning. Complacency. Complacency kills. Now, in addition to all of the other research the NTSB did on this accident, they also calculated the B speeds for the aircraft. V1 was 106, VR 110, and V2 117. Obviously, after that, it's 125. The pilot rotated at 102. That's 8 knots slower than what you were supposed to take off at. Now that puts you in a bad predicament in addition to everything else that went wrong. You were slower than you should have been. And that VMC is predicated on one of the wings stalling and flipping the airplane over on its side. Slow is what's going to lead to a stall. Now, in addition to all of the other problems by not using checklists, one of the items on the before takeoff checklist is to tighten the friction locks on the throttles. Had they done this, there probably would not have been a throttle migration. It was not an engine failure. It was a throttle migration that could have simply been avoided by two things: tightening the friction locks. And in addition, what I do is I always tell my co-pilot to keep his hands on the throttle quadrant just below the throttle so they don't migrate. Now, one of the airplanes that I fly has auto throttles. I still have him do that. And it's important because at V1, the pilot flying is supposed to remove his hands from the throttle to avoid inadvertently trying to stop the airplane after V1. Once you rotate and you're off the ground, your hands go back on the throttle. So this was a problem in and of itself. Well, guys, unfortunately, on that ill-fated day, 10 people gave their lives for something that could have been easily avoided by doing your checklist and briefings. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. In aviation, they call it the Swiss cheese model, when things just line up like a domino effect. They just keep going wrong, one after the other. But it could have been mitigated. It could have been mitigated by, like I said, doing the checklist, following procedures, and doing your briefings. Now, I don't like to be a Monday morning quarterback or disparage another pilot. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm simply giving you my opinion on the reason that this terrible accident occurred. And I know that many, many pilots out there agree with me 100%. It's sad. May they all rest in peace. The only positive thing that comes out of this is that we learn going forward to hopefully not repeat the mistakes of others. Guys, if you enjoyed today's video and you learned something from it, please hit the like button, subscribe, hit the bell. It'll remind you each and every time there's a new video. And please leave a respectful comment. Whether it's positive or negative, I do want to hear from you. This is your favorite contract corporate pilot, Frank Gallo, signing off.